Would you love to have regular mentoring from wise moms like Beth Ann? Join us now in the Restoration Home community. We only open 4 times a year and we're open now. When you join, you get weekly lesson plans with ideas for connecting with the whole family, virtue practices, lesson plans, and beautiful poetry. When you join, you also get access to monthly mentor mom calls with wise mentor moms such as Beth Ann. You get a monthly book club with myself. You get access to regional groups and an invitation to our private Restoration Home retreat held in beautiful Thompson Station, Tennessee. We would love to have you join us and grow in virtue and wisdom together with us in 2026. It's a special community full of wise and intentional moms, but we only open 4 times a year. Save 10% on your membership with code Restoration10. Join today. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about the peaceful path to connected families and restored communities. I'm so excited to be chatting with Emelie Pepito today on the show. We've been talking a lot about vision in the Restoration Home community. In January, one of our habits for the month was developing a family vision. And I'm excited to have the chance to talk to Emelie about it tonight. We just read the book, The Legacy Life, and so it's really fresh on my mind. But Emelie, I'd love to hear, do you remember when you were an adult, and you might have already been gone, honestly, you might have been in the UK at school. We decided to write down this family charter and code of conduct. And, we had other visions earlier. Like, I would just love to hear your perspective on vision. Like, do you remember us having any in our family? And, your dad and I were well-meaning and sometimes dysregulated. And so sometimes we, tried things and didn't follow through very well. And so anyone listening should feel so hopeful because you could be imperfect and still raise an amazing person like you. But I just would love to hear like what you remember about vision from growing up.
I remember the family code of conduct and agreement. I think one of the things I remember was you had to be responsible for making one meal a week. We each had our own meal. And I remember a couple different sessions of vision planning growing up where you and Dad would sit down and kind of ask us what our dreams were, our visions were. And I think that most New Year's you would have us write down some goals or some dreams for the year. I think the biggest thing though is that the way you and Dad did vision cast is it affected how you raised us. And so you really raised us with a lot of intentionality and a lot of focus. And so I don't necessarily remember like these massive annual family vision sessions, but I remember cutting up journals and doing sort of dream pages. And I remember planning New Year's Eves and just a lot of intentionality of like, we're going to pray in this new year. We're going to ask God what he wants from us. We're going to focus on what matters to us. This is, these are our priorities and this is what we're going to do. So I remember that sort of being just the flavor that crossed our entire family culture growing up.
Yeah, that's such a good response. I appreciate your insights because over the course of January in the Restoration Home community, we were working on writing down a family vision. And so there's lots of different ways that could be done. Like the most basic to me is just writing down, what do you want your kids to remember about life in your home? Because if you at least know that, it can help you sort of anchor your days. If you want your children to remember that home was a safe place and that your parents were present and that there was a lot of laughter, then maybe if you're kind of depressed all the time, or if there's a lot of fighting, or if it's super, super busy and there's no time to have fun together, maybe you'll make adjustments based on your goal. But also there's, we just read this book called The Legacy Life by David Green and Bill High, and they talk about these businesses that have been around for 100 years that were, or longer even. Some of them were like the longest running businesses. And some of these people had mission statements. They had a code of conduct. I'm just going to read you really quick the code of conduct from the Kikkoman family business. So they were in business for 20 generations, over 100 years. And their code of conduct was to strive for harmony in your family, avoid luxury. A simple life is a virtuous life. Do the job you were born to do and only that job. Eat the same food as your servants and keep your personal expenses low. And I mean, I think that's really beautiful. Like, you would have a lot more freedom and ability to sort of flex with God's plan for your life if you were, avoiding luxury and keeping your personal expenses low.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
totally. I love that list. It's such a beautiful, it's really amazing. It's simple, but I think anybody could take that list and have a better life for running with it.
Yeah. I think you and Kagan will really enjoy this book because there's all these, like, he talks about the Rothschilds and the Vanderbilts, and he talks about how, we might have feelings about the Rothschilds and Vanderbilts based on some of the things we've heard, but like, the Rothschilds were a Jewish family, and they had a lot bigger emphasis on responsibility to the family, on family unity, on a generational impact in a sense. Whereas the Vanderbilts were much more like according to this book, more sort of just about money and keeping the money in the family. And the Vanderbilts end up, with nothing. Like, I think actually Anderson Cooper is the son of maybe Gloria Vanderbilt, the designer who was an inheritor of the Vanderbilts, but I don't think Anderson Cooper supposedly got anything from that family. Whereas the Rothschilds, like, still are pretty powerful banking family today. And I think, the interesting thing is just those families that sort of had these long-term impacts, whether it was, a money family or even looking at like missionary families, whatever, those families often had a really strong sense of family culture that, helped them celebrate their progress. And the book is by the CEO of Hobby Lobby. And so he really talks about like how, having a vision pulls us onward, having a mission statement helps us, it indicates the actions we'll take, and then having like values or a code of conduct kind of gives you principles of behavior, guardrails to life. How has growing up in a family that sort of emphasized vision helped you develop vision as an adult?
I mean, for one thing, it's obviously helped me create my own visions, and that's huge. I think another thing that's really helped me is have a long-term vision, which gives me resilience for the present. Like right now, I'm living in survival mode. But because you have modeled so well having a life vision, I'm not sort of derailed or disoriented by the chaos that I'm living in right now, because I'm like, this is not forever. I have a vision of where I'm going. I have a vision of what I want my life to look like. And I am entering chaos in order to build something better that is vision focused in the long run for the short term cost. And so I think being able to really ride out the ups and downs of life and the uncontrollable with a little more grace and resiliency, because I'm not sort of day to day trying to self construct, if that makes sense. I'm not so dependent on how my day looks because I have this year plan.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's interesting because, in the book, The Legacy Life, they also talk a lot about generational impact. And, they reference Genesis 17:7, where God says, I will establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. And in my life, like, one of the things that has really been very formative for me as a mother of adult children is thinking about, what do I want my family to say about me at my funeral? What do I want to be said about me at the end of my life? Because I don't have as much control at this point about what my children remember about life in my home. And I don't even have as much control over, the code of conduct, because most of you have established your own homes at this point. But I do have an ability to respond to circumstances in ways that are life-giving or life-draining for the people around me, which I think it doesn't end. So people, if you're listening and you're like towards the end of your parenting journey, there's still lots of room for vision. And I think the people who wrote Legacy Life, like Hobby Lobby CEO, he probably wasn't just always talking to his kids about their family vision. I think some of this did develop as they built a big business and realized, wow, we have a legacy here. We have something, because they grew up kind of poor, and his parents were kind of poor. And so then they were just working so hard. And I'm sure that a lot of the child raising years were a little bit more intense like that. But some of this, he's in his 80s. Some of these visions and mission statements have happened probably later on as they had some success, so that now even their great grandchildren, they have family meetings every month, and they have family celebrations quarterly. Like, they have a real family culture, but some of that wasn't developed until later. And so if you're listening and you're feeling sad, like, oh, it's too late for me, don't be discouraged, because legacy can be restored. And so, like they say in the book, to start where you are and trust the results to God. There's a few other ways I want to talk about vision. Like, you can write down sort of your goals for the year. You could write down your being and doing goals. So just a list of, like, what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of things do you want to do? That's another way to look at vision. You could write down just a code of conduct. We will link the free Peaceful Press Family Vision Guide in the show notes, because that's such a helpful template. It's basically this template where it has you write down your essentials, and then there's space for you to write down your family verse or motto. And I think for our family, I'm just going to ask you, Emelie, because I wonder, can you recall any family verse that we have?
The one that comes to mind is, whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men.
Oh, I love that verse so much. The one I was thinking of is Isaiah 58. Like I said, I obviously recited a lot of verses to my children, and at different seasons, different things were emphasized. But I know Isaiah 58 was always kind of your dad's favorite verse. And, he talked a lot about how, basically it talks about the fast that I have required, and it's to do good, it's to do good to people, do good. But then later on it talks about we will be restorers of the breach and repairers of streets to dwell in. I think that's such a beautiful picture for Restoration Home families, that we are restorers of the breach. Like, we are on a journey of restoration in the world, and that means sometimes thinking beyond what's going on around us. It's thinking beyond the comfort or discomfort of our current life, because for sure, seasons of parenting are very uncomfortable. And I hate to say it to you, but it's not going to get easier necessarily. It's just going to get different. I know those of you who are listening who have adult children or grandchildren, you would probably agree with me that it doesn't really get easier. It just gets different, because you're not as busy trying to wipe little bottoms and feed little mouths. It's more about, navigating bigger things with bigger people. But if you don't have a vision for the impact that your life could make and the power of what you're doing, it's going to be really hard to stay encouraged when you're in those seasons. I love you talking, Emelie, about your own stressful season. Like, you don't yet have children looking to you, but you're still living a life of vision, even though there's stressful things happening around you.
Yeah, and I think the life of vision doesn't have to be this big grandiose thing. I do remember Dad quoting Isaiah, "Make the path straight," and quoted. I think he quoted to my brothers a lot more, but that was always the rebuilding and the repairing. That was a huge motto of his growing up, and that was really impactful. And I think a family vision is just that that thing that you kind of are working towards, and it doesn't have to be this multi-generational, multi-million-dollar business. It can just be this memory that your children leave your home with of Sunday afternoon lunches or Sunday afternoon drives, or being out in nature together, or reading aloud by the fire, or even a family culture of forgiveness. Like that is a vision totally worth going for. And a lot of times, I think, like so many good things, we get really excited about a family vision, and then we want to create this big multi-step, multifaceted vision that has a lot of moving components and is overwhelming, and maybe doesn't even line up with who we really are. And I think one thing when you're creating your family vision, Ronald Rolheiser in his book, The Holy Longing, he actually talks a lot about the individual. And the book, ironically, is focused a lot on the church and the role of the church. But he starts by talking about the individual. And when you're creating your family vision, really being like, what is my story? Like, what has God done in my life to give me a unique view on the world and unique strengths and unique weaknesses, and how can I honor and glorify him and leave the world a slightly better place through what he's done in my life? And going with that, and it's like, be original. Like, God wants your family vision to glorify him in a way that only your family can. And so it's great, like I said at the beginning of the show, that the Kikkoman's vision was incredible, and it is like that. Those rules of life are amazing, and there's things to glean from that. But I think as you're thinking and you're praying and you're walking and you're just observing your family and you're thinking about your family, being like, what do we value? What do we love? What makes us laugh? Like, that's one of the big things when you're creating your family vision, is what brings your family closer now. And so if you're walking into this and you don't have a preset vision, really take into account what makes you laugh, the story God's already written in your life, the strengths and weaknesses that's created, the things that bring you joy, and the mark that you want to leave, or the way that you want to be remembered.
That's so beautiful, Emelie, because I think, as Christians, there's a core set of values that we're passing on to our kids. There's the 10 Commandments, there's the Beatitudes. There are core values that I know if you're in a catechetical church, then you are also passing on a catechesis to your children. I don't know if I made that word catechetical, but, if you're in a church that has a catechesis, then you're passing that on to your kids as well. We were always passing on scripture and reciting the Apostles' Creed or the Lord's Prayer. We were passing on Christian values, but it's true, we're also all unique. And so learning to, pay attention to that, because God has created each of us for good works. It says we are created in Christ Jesus for good works, so walk in them. And I think sometimes what can really trip up homeschool families and this is why I think vision is so important, is they start looking at what other people are doing and feel inferior or jealous. Do you know what I mean? I did this in my life. Like, some families were super good at speech and debate, and it wasn't my thing. We had other things we wanted to do, but then I could kind of feel like, oh, maybe if we were better at speech and debate, we better be a better family, Or I could see people who were really, really involved with sports and be like, oh, maybe if we were really involved with sports, then we'd be a better family. But when we know what's important to us and to God, we can create a simple life that has space for what is important. And for us, like, we really bonded over family hikes and family mission trips and family travel. We have some beautiful memories and experiences because of that. And so, recognizing that we're all different, and you're going to have a lot more of a bonded family if you lean into what makes you special instead of trying to copy everybody else. When you're just trying to be all people all the time, you're going to be so exhausted. And I mentioned tonight in my meeting that, that saying by Socrates, beware the barrenness of a busy life. And I think that's the problem with living without vision, is you don't know where you're going. In Habakkuk, I think it's 2:2, it says, write the vision and make it plain so that they may run who see it. He may run who reads it. And I think that's so beautiful, because it does almost make space for you to live into what God's called you to when you know what that is. And like you said, it doesn't have to be this big formal thing. It could just be the atmosphere of your home. It could be that you're a mom who prays every day for your family, and that's that's the way you live. And maybe you're not going to write down, we are a family who prays every day. Maybe you're just going to do it, and that's okay too. But knowing what's important to you is going to make space for saying no to the things that are actually going to derail your family from your vision.
Totally. And your vision is not your salvation. I think it's so easy as Christians to let so many of these things that make life better or that are boxes to tick, to let them start to become our salvation. And I think especially when you transition into having older kids, it's easy to want to keep ticking those boxes to feel like you are saved and holy. And that vision is not what saves you. And so if your vision dies for a couple years, that's okay. If your vision changes, that's okay. You know, your vision, it's not even, I don't want to say this like lightly, but it's not even an indicator of how holy you are per se. Like it is a, it is, you know, like we want to be, you know, right. Like God commands us to write his word on our hearts and to meditate on his word. And so we are called to live holy and set apart. So I'm not dissing that, but I think it's so easy as Christians to take our preferences and make our preferences moral choices. And they're not. Like a lot of them aren't. And so just being aware of that, I think, as you're writing it and yeah, treat it with some joy. Let the joy of the Lord be your strength.
So good, Emelie. Well, this has been delightful to get to chat with you about developing a family vision. We're going to link the family vision. It's a free family vision template in the show notes so that families can grab that and just fill in your essentials. You can write down your favorite family verses, and then there's 9 spaces underneath for writing your values. And if you're a mom who's read Habits for a Sacred Home and you really want to write down your values for, you know, hospitality or community or prayer, those 9 spaces would be a perfect space to write that. So you could write down, you know, prayer, the Pepito family prays together every day, or hospitality. We love God and others, and so we open our homes once a month for dinner for people, or, you know, whatever the value that you have, or the kind of the code of conduct. Those 9 spaces are a great place to write those. And we'll also link Habits for a Sacred Home in the show notes and The Legacy Life. Those are both wonderful books for helping you define your family vision and values and kind of get a little bit of a roadmap. But if one of your values is homeschooling with joy, nurturing a connected family, spending time in nature, these were some of our family values. And that's why I wrote the Peaceful Press curriculum. I loved being with my children and reading beautiful stories that nurtured virtuous character, spending time in nature together so that we could bond, but not just bond with each other, but also attune with God. When you take time to be quiet in nature, it gives us a chance to even feel the goodness and grace and mercy of our Lord, which is such a bulwark for our children against the storms of life when they are able to connect with God on their own. And so if you would love to create a homeschool rhythm that nurtures peace and vision and presence and connection, grab the Peaceful Press resources. We will link a free sample in the show notes and kind of a blog post that gives you a roadmap. Because our resources are family style, sometimes families are like, well, where do I start? And we would say, if your kids are in preschool, do the Peaceful Preschool, then follow with the 2nd volume or the Nourishing Nature Kindergarten. And then when they're in 1st grade, enjoy a wonderful geography year with our Precious People Year 1 World Geography. And if you're jumping into the Peaceful Press for the first time, it's the 250th anniversary of the United States this year. And so this might be a really fun time to start thinking about an American history resource. Our Playful Pioneers Volume 2 covers U.S. geography. It's a fantastic tour of the 50 states. And then the Playful Pioneers Volume 1, in it we read the Little House on the Prairie books, are so heartwarming, and do some really fun projects and literature, look at art and poetry. So any of our resources would bring so much joy to your family, and you can find the link in the show notes and use code RESTORATION for 10% off your purchase.